Radical objectivity. The human brain evolved to prioritize survival through intense emotional signaling. Your amygdala perceives a social slight as a lethal threat to your status within the tribe. Mental strength requires the systematic deconstruction of this biological glitch. You must view your internal states as data packets rather than absolute truths. Emotions are merely chemical fluctuations designed to manipulate your behavior towards short-term safety. The superior mind operates through radical objectivity. It treats personal trauma as a technical error in a complex system. You observe the surge of adrenaline without granting it the power to dictate your motor functions. Logic becomes the primary operating system, while sentiment is relegated to a background process. This is not about suppressing feelings. It is about stripping them of their perceived authority over your reality. The masses are governed by the pleasure principle and the avoidance of discomfort. They seek validation like starving animals seek calories. You must realize that your ego is a hallucination crafted by social conditioning. Radical objectivity allows you to dissect your own failures with the cold precision of a forensic pathologist. You do not mourn the loss of a relationship or a career milestone. You analyze the variables that led to the outcome and adjust your strategy accordingly. Most people are trapped in a feedback loop of self-pity and entitlement. They believe their feelings grant them special rights in a physical universe that is indifferent to their existence. Strength is the ability to stand in the wreckage of your own life and calculate the structural integrity of what remains. Peace is just the absence of hope for a different past. Strategic pessimism. Optimism is a cognitive bias that renders the individual vulnerable to sudden environmental shifts. The mentally strong utilize strategic pessimism to insulate their consciousness from the shock of failure. This technique involves the systematic visualization of every possible catastrophic outcome before it occurs. You map the terrain of your own destruction to ensure no event can trigger a cortisol spike. By premeditating misery, you drain the future of its power to surprise you. Most individuals live in a state of perpetual hope, which is essentially a high-risk gamble with their own stability. When reality inevitably fails to meet their expectations, they suffer a total psychological collapse. You must preempt this by accepting the worst-case scenario as the most likely outcome. True resilience is built on the foundation of a shattered optimism. The dopamine reward system is easily manipulated by the anticipation of success. This leads to reckless decision-making and an inability to perceive structural weaknesses in a plan. Strategic pessimism functions as a neurological firewall against this irrationality. You do not move forward until you have accounted for every possible betrayal and logistical failure. This is not depression. It is a clinical assessment of a chaotic world. You recognize that entropy is the natural state of the universe. Order is an anomaly that requires constant, cold maintenance. Those who rely on positive thinking are merely victims waiting for a sufficiently large crisis to erase them. You find strength in the certainty that things will go wrong. Mentally strong people are never disappointed because they have already mourned every outcome. Preparation is the only antidote to the cruelty of chance. Volitional isolation. Human beings possess a deep-seated biological drive for social cohesion. This herd instinct is a primary source of psychological weakness and manipulation. To be mentally strong, you must achieve volitional isolation. This is the ability to function with total efficiency while completely disconnected from the approval or presence of others. Most people are terrified of their own internal silence. They use social interaction to drown out the realization of their own insignificance. You must embrace the void. Isolation is the laboratory where the ego is dismantled and the will is tempered. It removes the variables of peer pressure and social comparison from your decision-making matrix. When you no longer require the gaze of others to validate your existence, you become immune to the primary mechanism of social control. The need for belonging is a leash used by the mediocre to restrain the exceptional. It forces you to adopt the lowest common denominator of thought and behavior. Volitional isolation allows you to observe the social hierarchy without being a participant in its petty dramas. You treat social interactions as transactional exchanges rather than emotional necessities. This perspective prevents the formation of parasitic attachments that drain your mental resources. Strength is found in the capacity to be entirely alone in a crowded room without feeling the urge to bridge the gap. Most individuals are terrified of being social pariahs. They sacrifice their principles and their potential for the warmth of the collective. You understand that the herd is only warm because it is composed of dying bodies. True power begins at the moment you stop seeking an audience. Neuroplastic resilience. The concept of trauma is often used as a permanent excuse for behavioral stagnation. Mentally strong individuals view the brain as a highly plastic machine that can be rewired through deliberate hardship. This is neuroplastic resilience. You do not seek comfort. You seek controlled exposure to stressors that force your neural pathways to adapt. The prefrontal cortex must be trained to override the primitive impulses of the hindbrain. This requires a relentless pursuit of discomfort. You intentionally place yourself in high-pressure environments to desensitize your nervous system to the sensation of fear. Over time, the threshold for what constitutes a crisis increases. What breaks an ordinary person becomes a routine task for you. You are the architect of your own neurological evolution. Strength is a physiological habit formed through repeated exposure to pain. Psychology often categorizes individuals by their past experiences. This is a deterministic trap that prevents growth. You must treat your past as a series of discarded prototypes. Neuroplastic resilience means you have no fixed personality, only a set of functional responses to environmental demands. You can overwrite your own character traits if they no longer serve your objectives. Most people are prisoners of their own childhood narratives. They repeat the same self-destructive patterns because they believe those patterns are who they are. You recognize that the self is an illusion generated by the brain to simplify navigation. By changing your behavior, you change your biology. The goal is to become a blank slate capable of manifesting whatever traits the current situation requires. Growth is the violent shedding of the person you were yesterday. Identity fluidity. The desire for a stable identity is a symptom of cognitive rigidity. Most people spend their lives defending a specific version of themselves to the public. This makes them predictable and easy to manipulate. Mental strength involves identity fluidity. You must be willing to abandon your beliefs, your habits, and your public persona at a moment's notice. When you are not attached to a specific identity, you cannot be insulted or shamed. These social weapons require a fixed target to be effective. By remaining fluid, you become a moving target that no criticism can hit. You view yourself as a tool to be optimized rather than a soul to be preserved. This allows for total tactical flexibility in any social or professional environment. You are whatever the situation requires you to be. The ego is a parasite that feeds on the need to be right. It forces you to defend obsolete ideas just because you have associated them with your name. Identity fluidity allows you to admit error without feeling a loss of status. You see ideas as disposable assets. If an idea is no longer useful, you discard it without sentimentality. Most people are trapped in the prison of their own reputations. They continue to act in ways that harm them simply to remain consistent with their past selves. You understand that consistency is the hallmark of the unevolved. A strong mind is a shapeless mind. It takes the form of the vessel it inhabits. You do not have a core. You have a mission. Everything else is just theater. The only constant in your life should be your commitment to your own functional superiority. Linguistic austerity. Speech is a primary leakage point for mental energy and strategic information. Most people talk to fill the silence or to project an image of competence they do not possess. Linguistic austerity is the practice of speaking only when it is mathematically necessary. Every word you utter is a potential vulnerability. It gives others a window into your thought process and emotional state. Mentally strong individuals maintain a high level of verbal economy. They understand that silence is a vacuum that others will desperately try to fill with their own secrets and insecurities. By saying less than necessary, you appear more powerful and remain more observant. You listen to the subtext of others while providing no subtext of your own. Your internal world remains a closed system, impenetrable to outside influence. The modern world is obsessed with transparency and oversharing. This is a trap designed to facilitate social monitoring and control. Linguistic austerity allows you to maintain a strategic advantage in all interactions. You do not explain your motives or defend your actions. Explanations are a form of submission. They imply that the other person has the right to judge you. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim your autonomy. Most people are addicted to the sound of their own voices. They believe that if they talk long enough, they will eventually be understood. You realize that true understanding is impossible and usually unnecessary. You use language as a precise instrument for achieving specific outcomes, not as a medium for emotional catharsis. Silence is the ultimate expression of self-control. The loudest man in the room is always the weakest. Primal utility. Civilization has attempted to domesticate the human spirit, labeling natural survival instincts as toxic or antisocial. Mental strength requires a return to primal utility. You must view every action, relationship, and thought through the lens of its objective usefulness. Does this contribute to your survival, your power, or your objective goals? If the answer is no, it must be excised. This includes moral considerations that serve no functional purpose other than to make you feel socially acceptable. Primal utility recognizes that the world is a competitive arena where resources are finite. Cooperation is a strategy, not a moral obligation. You do not help others out of a sense of duty. You help them when it creates a favorable debt or strengthens a necessary alliance. This is the cold logic of the predator. The concept of goodness is often a mask for cowardice. People are good because they are too afraid to be anything else. They follow rules because they lack the strength to create their own. Primal utility frees you from the burden of these artificial constraints. You operate based on what works, not what is perceived as right. This does not mean you are unnecessarily cruel. Cruelty is often inefficient. It means you are prepared to do what is necessary without the interference of guilt. Guilt is a biological alarm system intended to keep you in line with the group. You have learned to mute that alarm. You take what you need and defend what you have. Most people live in a state of moral paralysis. They watch their opportunities vanish while they debate the ethics of taking them. Strength is the courage to be effective. Temporal nihilism. The human mind is plagued by an obsession with legacy and the future. People suffer immensely over the thought of how they will be remembered or what will happen after they die. Temporal nihilism is the realization that time eventually erases all achievements and all suffering. This perspective provides an ultimate form of mental strength. If nothing matters in the long term, then the fear of failure in the short term is irrational. You are free to take massive risks because the consequences are ultimately zero. This is not a reason for despair. It is the source of total psychological liberation. You stop living for a hypothetical future and start operating with maximum intensity in the present moment. The pressure to be someone evaporates, leaving only the raw experience of the will. The ego believes it is the center of a cosmic drama. It wants to leave a mark on the world. Temporal nihilism reminds you that the world is a spinning rock in a cold vacuum, and your mark will be gone in a geological heartbeat. When you accept this, you stop being a slave to your ambitions. You pursue your goals for the sheer pleasure of the exercise, not because you need them to justify your existence. Most people are crushed by the weight of their own expectations. They live in a constant state of anxiety about their place in history. You understand that history is just a list of people who are now dead and forgotten. You are a ghost inhabiting a biological machine for a brief window of time. There is no reason to be anything other than completely fearless. The end is certain, so the middle is yours to play with.